Welcome back. All right, news of the day for all you fine people for your Thursday. Starting off with Hockey Canada. Yep, starting where we left off yesterday when it comes to the news with Hockey Canada shedding money right, left, and center. Sponsorships and a big one announced today as being out Canadian Tire. Canadian Tire is a huge one for Hockey Canada, but TELUS, Scotiabank, Tim Hortons on the list. Tim Hortons, a huge supporter of hockey in Canada for kids, for juniors, and really honestly advertise a ton in NHL broadcasts as well. So losing that money is huge. And so, yeah, again, Hockey Canada of the mind that we're going to keep going forward. It's only a matter of time before Eddie Livingstone memories are really brought up with this, because something's got to change. And I'm kind of thinking, if all the provinces kind of just take off from Hockey Canada and decide we can start our own organization together, that might be what ends up happening. Skip the Dishes Sobeys also on the list of sponsors who've taken their money out. Skip the Dishes advertises lots in Canada, so there's lots of money there too. And Sobeys, not a small company either. So that's a lot of money that Hockey Canada has lost. And again, I keep seeing things about their embattled leadership. I don't know if embattle's the word or incompetent, but at this point, every major corporation seems to be saying, you know what, it's in our best interests, and probably from a PR perspective too, if you want to be cynical, to get the money out of Hockey Canada and try to force change. So I don't know if it's going to force change, but I would think that it could. Had a bit of a flicker there with the power, but we're okay. All right, keep going. All right, everything's fine. All right, we good? We're good. Whew, that was a scary moment. All right, Steve Staios, moving on to other news. Steve Staios has been hired by the Edmonton Oilers as a special advisor in player development, and so he'll be working with players. But I think there's more to it than this, and this is why I'm reporting on it. He has left his job with the Hamilton Bulldogs, where he was president and GM. So I don't think he leaves a job where he's president and GM just to take a role in the Oilers organization that won't likely expand. So maybe he ends up being an assistant GM. Maybe Ken Holland, who realizes that he's amongst the older GMs in the league, is seeing that, retirement's going to come at some point, and maybe Staios is a potential candidate to be the next general manager for the Oilers. Smart hockey player. He adapted quite well. He was one of those players, too, that could play defense. He could play fourth line forward. He did a little bit of both. And obviously, he's taken that intelligence and it's translated after his career has been done in other jobs in hockey, because the Bulldogs were an excellent team this past year. So this could be good. Also in Oiler news today, both Cuckoo and Pickard being waived. I'm not surprised at Pickard. I'm not really surprised at Cuckoo either. Looking at that blue line, it makes some sense to keep some of the young guys there. And I think both Cuckoo and Pickard will clear. Pickard was decent in the appearance I saw of his with the Oilers this preseason, but you only have room for two goaltenders, and that's Campbell and Skinner. So, yeah, that's what happens. Speaking of goalies being waived, the Bruins did waive Keith Kincaid, which is not a surprise. Kincaid played well, though. And I kind of feel bad for Kincaid at this point in his career, where he does play well anytime he gets called up, but he's not viewed as an NHL-level goaltender at this point. I guess there isn't a job out there for him. We'll see whether or not he clears. I think he in all likelihood does, but again, I thought he looked pretty good. Koppinen, Lettieri, and Renouf also on that list. Renouf took a couple of penalties last night. One of them was kind of a not a great penalty, so I don't think these guys get picked up, although Lettieri does have some NHL experience. Also sent down Ashawn. I'm a little bit surprised at Ashawn, but keep in mind, and I've said this myself, players who don't require waivers to be sent down are easier to send down. So I'm a little bit surprised. I would think Ashawn is the first call up when they need another defenseman. Beecher being sent down. I thought Beecher looked good. Can't wait to see how he progresses at the AHL level. Kaiser sent down. Goaltending depth there. Lascelles sent down to the AHL. Good. He needs that development time. And McLaughlin, which is a bit of a surprise, but not really. I mentioned in recent, I think it was in the review I don't think it was last night's game. I think it was the one before between Boston and New Jersey, that McLaughlin probably gets cut because he doesn't require waivers. And here we are. So he played well enough to make the team as far as I can tell, as far as I'm concerned. But again, for Boston, do you want to waive a guy like Studnicka and just watch him get lost for nothing? or do you want to just send McLaughlin down and not have to worry about that problem right now? And I just used Studnicka as an example. There are other forwards that Boston could possibly have waived in order to keep McLaughlin on the roster. Good news for Arizona fans. Clayton Keller is going to make at least he's supposed to make his preseason debut tomorrow against the Vancouver Canucks. He broke his femur March 30th. It was an ugly injury, and thankfully he is coming back and sounds like he's good to go. So the Coyotes should be pretty healthy come start of the season. Last night on the TNT broadcast, Paul Bissonnette, and I mean, he just said stuff. He's that relaxed, just saying stuff, and it's just opinion. But his opinion upset some people yesterday, so I figured I might as well throw that into this video since it was trending. It said 50% of the reason the women watch hockey is because hockey players are good looking. Male hockey players are good looking. And I don't know the number. It does happen. There are young women and there are teenage girls who watch hockey because, hey, these guys are hot. But I don't think it's that high of a number. And I say that because it's a 60-minute game. So if somebody's good looking, okay, but it's a 60-minute game. They're wearing a helmet the whole time. It's not like you get close-ups of their face or whatever. Not getting into that. It's a PG-rated show I run here. And so I really don't think it's that high of a number. Do women find hockey players good looking? Well, yes. And in Canada, it feels like there's a lot of it. But at the same time, I don't think that's the only reason. But I do. It's one of those things that I can understand on some level where he's coming from. The phrasing might have been part of the issue there, though, because again, does it happen? Well, yes. Is it 50%? No. But I mean, I've seen instances where, women are talking about a hockey player and they're like, he's the greatest. And my answer's been, he's not. And the answer is, he's really hot though. And I'm like, well, I can't assail that logic. So clearly, and just as a note, if you come upon a conversation like that, you cannot say, yeah, but the player sucks. They need to trade him. Don't do that. They don't take it very well. But again, I think it's the percentage. I think if he had just said, yeah, there are women that watch the game just because they find hockey players attractive, I don't think anybody can really find fault with that. That's the way it works. I also watch pro wrestling. There are definitely instances of that with wrestling where women might watch wrestling because there's really good looking guys, or guys might watch wrestling for really good looking women, or some men watch wrestling because they like good looking men, and women because they like good looking women. It's this mixed bag. Again, it was trending, so I thought it'd be an interesting conversation point. You guys can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, getting back to hockey news, Philadelphia, and I do enjoy throwing in these odd articles here and there because I think it's something different. But Philadelphia, and this is an interesting one. I've talked about this before. You have a player you bring up from the AHL. The system being coached in the AHL is the same as the system being coached in the NHL, right? And how important that is, because then you bring a guy up from the AHL, and they step out on the ice. They already know the system. They already know the expectations of the team. John Tortorella is saying no. We're not doing that in Philadelphia, and he's explained why, and it makes some sense as I've got on the board here. The reason being this: you're an AHL coach. You are now being assigned systems from the NHL parent team of this is what we need you to coach our players to do. Those systems may not be ones that you necessarily believe in, and they may not be ones that you coach particularly well either. So you might be taking your AHL coach out of his comfort zone. Now, I've also seen people online answer that with, or you could hire an American Hockey League coach and basically in the interview process figure out you're on the same page, right? So you bring in the AHL guy and you say, all right, this is what we're going to be coaching this year. This is what we're most concerned about. And him saying, yeah, I buy in, or that's not really my style. And then you could look for either a replacement or figure out a way to make it work, right? But Tortorella's saying it won't be the same system. The one issue again is if it's a guy being called up and he's there for, say, 2 games as a fill-in, if he struggles with systems that are in place from Tortorella, and, does that hurt his future with the team? Tortorella says this is all overblown, the idea of systems, and he says it's not a difficult game. I do think at times we as sports fans make it sound a lot more complicated than what it really is. But it'll be interesting to see how things go for Philadelphia and whether or not that's borne out to be accurate. And again, we'll take a look at how players develop at the AHL level and when they come up to the NHL and see how things go. Calgary, not really surprising anybody today. Both Cody Eakin and Sonny Milano released from their tryouts. Neither of them played in last night's loss against Winnipeg, and that was seen as pretty damning because if a guy's on a tryout and you don't have him in the lineup, you're not seeing him as being an important part of the lineup. So the problem is that Milano's play in the preseason and just his training camp weren't very good. So I think this limits his opportunities going forward. He'll probably get an AHL level contract and or maybe signs in Europe. But neither of these players picked up by the Calgary Flames, who have a pretty good depth group up front. And when Markstrom was asked about whether or not he thinks his workload should be lighter, he's answered with no, it should be heavier. Now, I could have predicted that answer because he's a goaltender. You are not going to find a goaltender who says, yeah, I need to make sure I play 40 games or maybe 45. If I play more than that, I get really tired and my play suffers. You're not going to find a goal. And goalies always want the net. I know dating back to Luongo here in Vancouver, he was overplayed at times. But anytime you sat him down and said, you've played 12 games in a row, you've played 15 of the last 16, do you feel like you need a rest? His answer was always no. His answer was always, I want the net every night. If I could get 82 games a season in, I would. So it is understandable that a goaltender would feel that way. I do think with Markstrom, there are times during the season where Calgary should look at making sure he's getting the right amount of rest because it's not about the regular season, it's about the postseason and making sure that your goaltender is healthy, is in good headspace, and is able to get you over the hump come playoff time. So that's really the important part, even more than the workload during the regular season. But the workload during the regular season can decide whether or not a goalie is ready for the playoffs. Waiver news from today as well. Jason Megna waived by Colorado, which means there will be people watching this video saying, wow, Jason Megna is still playing. Yes, he is. And Elias Anderson waived by the LA Kings. A first-round draft pick that just has not worked out at the NHL level. I do not expect him to get picked. Johnny Brodzinski waived by the New York Rangers. I think if you're going to grab Johnny Brodzinski, you have to be another New York team because the name Johnny Brodzinski just sounds like a New York name, so I don't think he gets claimed. Because he just sounds like a New Yorker. Now, Seattle news. Shane Wright is, according to Ron Francis in an interview with Pierre LeBrun, likely to spend the entire season in the NHL. So this is good news, I think, for Wright. Good news for Seattle as well, because it means that he's done well in the preseason and in training camp, and should be in the league for the full year right after his draft. So good on him and good on Seattle, and we'll see if he makes teams regret not picking him up. I do find it entertaining that people point to the Habs drafting Slafkovsky, and it is completely ignored that two other teams passed on Wright for him to drop to Seattle. So Montreal gets a lot of flack, but not a whole lot said about Nemitz being taken by New Jersey, which might be a risk that really works out well for New Jersey. But Shane Wright's got a chip on his shoulder and could have a pretty solid rookie season. I think they'll try him with Beniers to start the season. I think they'll try putting the two together at least a little bit here and there. We'll see whether or not they gel, and if they do, Seattle could be an interesting team to watch for sure. Washington news, TJ Oshie not at practice today. I haven't seen anything about how long he might be out. He left the game early last night. And as I said in the review from last night's game, it could just be precaution. And this, again, could just be, abundance of caution given TJ Oshie's injury history. But given his injury history, it is still concerning. You don't like seeing TJ Oshie leaving the ice in any kind of discomfort. Orlov is seen as day-to-day with a lower body injury, and that's all they have to say on that. So Orlov, if it's day-to-day, if it's truly day-to-day, he should be good to go for the start of the season, right? Dallas, talking about Robertson, of course, last night, late hour, getting signed by Dallas. It's one of those times where I'm glad I'm on the West Coast. If I lived on the East Coast, I would have been in bed. I wouldn't have been up when that happened. I would have woke up with, what happened? But Robertson gets that extension. He's a restricted free agent at the end of the contract. And then he has a $9.3 million qualifying offer that's required by Dallas, which shouldn't be a problem by 2026. But he's only 1 year from unrestricted free agent status. What I find really interesting about this is that if this was a contract signed by any team in Canada, I guarantee there would be conversations about, well, see, he doesn't want to be here long term. But it's Robertson, it's Dallas, and so he's 1 year away from unrestricted free agency. Well, that gives him a pretty good bargaining position. But I haven't seen anything, at least not yet, saying, well, that proves he doesn't want to be in Dallas. It was basically it's a contract that pays him well now, and it should pay him extremely well later. I would think that a $9.3 million qualifying offer, I would not be surprised if Robertson ends up being a $10 million plus player. And honestly, he's been spectacular since they debuted. I think part of it is that he was second in Calder voting in what was a shortened season, where teams were just playing against their division. So I don't think a lot of people saw Robertson that first year in the NHL. He was remarkable. And then this past season, he got even better. So that's 2 really good seasons. I'm anxious to see what he can do for Dallas this year. The team, according to Puckpedia and Cap Friendly, now has $461,000 in cap space. So if they're going to do anything else, they'd have to move money out in order to get money in. But odds are Dallas is pretty set with their roster right now. I believe they're down to 28 players in camp. Most teams are down to less than 30 players in camp. And from here on, preseason games, we'll have a good idea for who's going to be playing and who's going to be in the minors and who got released. So there you go. Just a couple more days left in the preseason, and then we're into the regular season. Keeping in mind, of course, there's a regular season game tomorrow and a regular season game Saturday. And I'll be here to report on both of those when they take place. And then, of course, on the 11th, we really get things going at the NHL level. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.